I remember when I actually covered the Olmert case, the Katsav case, and I remember the media, the foreign media, they asked me, well, you should be ashamed that you have a president in court and you have a prime minister. I said, not only I'm not ashamed, I'm very proud that my country is able to actually to trial the highest man in the country as if he was the lowest one. And what actually Netanyahu is asking now is to be above the law. Okay, I am actually, the public interest needs for me to be above the law. And this is something that I think a democratic country cannot allow.
That is Professor Suzie Navot speaking on the very real threat to the integrity of Israel's judicial system. In her view, should Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu be granted a pardon by President Isaac Herzog? I'm Vivian Berkovich, former Canadian ambassador to Israel, former lawyer. But today, I'm getting into the issue of a presidential pardon for Prime Minister Netanyahu with Suzie Navot. Let's do this. Monday, December 8th, just after 9 a.m. in Israel, Suzie Navot, professor at the Israel Democracy Institute. Thank you so much for joining State of Tel Aviv today.
My pleasure, Vivian.
We are going to just dive right into it. Suzie, the issue of the pardon. A pardon for Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu from all the criminal indictments for which he faces trial currently. That has really kind of come to the fore since President Trump visited Israel a couple months ago. Explain when a pardon historically has been used, applied in Israel, and what constraints or protocols or practices apply.
It is actually quite clear because we have a basic law dealing with the president. And according to the basic law of the president of the state, the president, our President Herzog, he is empowered to grant pardon to offenders. This is what the law says, okay? To pardon offenders. Now, this basic law does not define who actually qualifies to be an offender. And it sets no criteria whatsoever for the president's discretion. Pardon is like a power of the kings historically, and it's something that has to do with mercy. But the pardon is not a substitute to the courts. And therefore, the principal idea is that only someone who has been convicted may ask for a pardon. And only you consider a pardon as a president only after all legal proceedings are complete. This is the idea. And that's why some people in Israel, even some professors, argue that the president cannot, at the moment, consider the pardon request because Netanyahu does not meet these conditions because he's in the middle of a criminal case. And what Netanyahu actually wants, according to these professors, is a demand to halt the proceedings in the court. And this is not a pardon. To halt the proceedings, you can ask someone else. And that someone else is actually the Attorney General. She has the power to halt, to stop illegal proceedings.
The issue of the president pardoning Prime Minister Netanyahu came to something of a boil following the whirlwind visit to Israel in October by President Donald Trump. While on the ground for 6 or so hours, President Trump attracted significant attention, as he seems to do everywhere he goes. He was stopping by to meet with hostage families, to meet with Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, and to speak to the Knesset. A truly historic address during which the mood was euphoric, and it was rightly so, because President Trump was on his way to sign a peace agreement, and President Trump implored President Herzog to pardon Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. Here's a clip of that extraordinary moment.
These two men are good men right here. Hey, I have an idea. Mr. President, why don't you give him a pardon? Give him a pardon. Come on. By the way, that was not in the speech, as you probably know. But I happen to like this gentleman right over here, and it just seems to make so much sense. You know, whether we like it or not, this has been one of the greatest wartime presidents. This has been one of the greatest wartime presidents. And cigars and champagne, who the hell cares about that? All right, enough controversy for the day, right? Actually, I don't think it's very controversial. So, you know, I mean, I see so popular. You are a very popular man. You know why? Because you know how to win.
Now, back to Suzie Navot, who explains that in spite of the legal obstacles to granting Benjamin Netanyahu a pardon, as requested by President Trump, there is one exception from the past that some scholars are saying provides the wiggle room needed to grant the man a pardon.
But as you mentioned, Vivian, we have one exception. We have a case dealing in the 80s of the last century, which is called the Bus 300s affair, in which a president, actually the father of Herzog, he granted a pardon before a conviction. And that's a really difficult case, a very peculiar case when Shin Bet agency, meaning the members of the security services, actually killed and captured and killed terrorists, and later they attempted to cover it up, meaning that they lied. They actually lied to a state investigate commission, and it was a scandal when it actually everything came up. And a unique arrangement was crafted in order not to prosecute those members of the Shin Bet, including the head of the Shin Bet. And actually, they asked President Herzog to pardon them before charges even were filed. And they did so. Actually, they asked President Herzog, and he granted the pardon. And the agents actually confessed. And after the pardon was granted, petitions were filed to the Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court, by a majority of 2-1, actually deal with the question that we first posed: who counts as an offender? If an offender means only somebody convicted, then Herzog had no authority to give it to them.
Correct.
But the High Court actually decided that in rare and exceptional cases, where a legal proceeding seriously may harm the public interest, then the president may grant this pre-conviction pardon. And Justice Aaron Barak, later to be the president of the Supreme Court, he actually was the one dissenting this decision. And so the rule of the past 300s, it's actually an exception. And in order to qualify to be under this exception, you must confess and you must accept responsibility. You must resign from office, and you must prove that this is a situation that is so exceptional that there is no reasonable alternative to that. And this is a very narrow path. And the question now before Herzog is whether this is the case of Netanyahu. Now, from my point of view, I don't see any link between the case of 300 and the case of Netanyahu. He is not something, it has nothing to do with security of the state. This is a personal criminal proceeding for bribery and for corruption. In Israel, we have already tried a former president of the state for rape, and we have already tried a former prime minister, Olmert, and we have even tried a chief rabbi, and we have shown the world that in Israel, everyone is equal before the law. It's not, we do not place the prime minister above the law. And therefore, I think that the argument that Netanyahu made, actually in his lawyer's petition, that Israel's supreme interest requires ending the trial, I think that the real public interest for the moment requires completely the opposite, because the public interest in a democracy is that there is a separation between the prime minister's personal interest and the national interest.
This point is so important and really merits a bit of a pause and focus. The request states explicitly that the prime minister will not admit to any guilt. Netanyahu has stated since that letter was sent that he also will not resign from public life. Quite the contrary, he has doubled down and made clear that he intends to run for re-election in the coming year. An election must be held in Israel before the end of October 2026. I'm going to quote now directly from the letter that was sent to President Herzog. In recent years, there has been an increase in tensions and disputes between parts of the nation and between the various state authorities. I am aware that the proceedings in my case have become a focus of intense debate. I have broad public and ethical responsibility, with an understanding of the consequences of all the events. Due to this, and despite my personal interest to conduct the trial and prove my innocence until I'm fully acquitted, I am of the belief that the public interest dictates otherwise. As part of my public responsibility as Prime Minister to bring about reconciliation among parts of the nation, I have no doubt that ending the trial will help lower the flames in the debate around it. Facing Israel's defense challenges and diplomatic opportunities these days, I am committed to do all I can to heal the rifts, achieve unity among the nation, and to restore trust in the country's systems. And that's what I expect of all branches of the country to do. Signed by Benjamin Netanyahu, Prime Minister. And that's the end of the quote. And it is precisely the blurring of this line between the individual and the state that Professor Suzie Navot addresses with us now.
We are not in a country where the idea is l'état c'est moi, I am the state.
Right.
If you give a pardon at this stage, it will actually harm the principle of equality before the law. It will damage the rule of law, because future prime ministers would never be prosecuted. They will always claim that a prosecution of a prime minister is contrary to the public interest. And it undermines actually the judicial system, because we will never know if all the claims that the criticism Netanyahu had about the flaws in his prosecution, and that there is nothing to prosecute him about, and they are prosecuting the right wing altogether, the Likud. We will never know the truth. And there is no confession, there is no responsibility taken, there is no resignation, and there is no exit from political life. So at the moment, at this very moment that we are talking, I think there is no base for this pardon.
Suzie, it's interesting because Prime Minister Netanyahu, in the original request for the pardon, made it very clear that he does not admit guilt in any way. No admission of guilt, which is one of the preconditions. And in recent days, he's taken to the media to announce and declare that he will not step down from political life. So this is very much just to kind of, bring back in or invoke the metaphor you introduced at the outset of a monarch. This is very much in keeping with that kind of standard. Netanyahu, we know, has been well briefed. He's a smart man and he understands how he's trying to thread this needle. And what you've said clearly is that the case 300 precedent does not apply here because President Chaim Herzog really wanted to find a solution. He probably stretched the law in order to do so, and possibly his discretion. But still, he said, you have to admit guilt. You have to remove yourself from public life. And you have to express remorse. Now, you said that Aaron Barak, who was on the Supreme Court at the time, dissented, did not agree with carving out that exception.
What Aaron Barak said, and I think that he's completely right, is that if Netanyahu seeks to end the trial, the proper mechanism is a plea bargain.
Right.
Even now, you go to the prosecution and it's okay, I am willing to admit something, and therefore you must give me something. And then he will be convicted of something. And after he is convicted, then the idea of a pardon is a good idea. If you want to clean Netanyahu from the stain he will have, but not while we are in the middle of the proceedings. And this is something that also appears from Netanyahu's request, not his lawyer's request. He says that he is willing to accept a pardon. He's not asking for a pardon. He's willing to accept it. He's giving up his right to complete the trial. And I wonder, why should he give up his right to complete the trial if he actually believes he's completely innocent? And if he cannot appear in court 3 days a week because he is the prime minister, there are mechanisms in Israeli law in order to deal with it. If he cannot appear in court, then he may declare himself what we call temporary incapacity for several months, for 3 months. And then he will go to court every day. He will clean up his name. He will actually be declared innocent, and we are over with it. If he seeks to end the trial, the pardon is not the right way. You go to a plea bargain. So you have the temporary incapacity, you have a plea bargain, but none of these actually equal tools, because they're equal for everyone. He is trying to use. He's trying to do something completely different. He's trying to actually bypass the legal mechanisms that are open for everybody, that are equal for everybody, while they are in a trial, in a prosecution, in a criminal prosecution.
And as we lawyers often like to say, it's a wonderful platitude that justice must not just be done, it must be seen to be done. The perception of the public, as you've commented, in seeing the justice system work and be applied equally to all is really important. Before I let you go, Suzie, I'd really like you to comment on one other case, which involved Prime Minister Rabin and his wife Leah. And it was in the 70s, and she held, in those days it was illegal. She had a bank account, I believe, in New York, in which she had a very small amount of money. And those were the sort of the waning, dying days of austerity in Israel. And for whatever reason, Prime Minister Rabin did not declare it. And rather than facing criminal prosecution and humiliation and all the mess that would attend and distract him from his prime ministerial duties, he resigned.
Yes, sir. Vivian, we're talking about another completely different era, where the idea was that we follow the rule of there are things that are not done. It isn't done. We follow principles and values and ethics. We are not there anymore. Okay. And he resigned in order not to, even if the prosecution was something completely technical, he resigned because he said, I cannot actually allow for me to be accepted as somebody that has done anything to do with the law. We are in different times, completely different times. Olmert, let me go to another prime minister. Olmert also, the moment that he was actually indicted for bribery, his partners at the government said, you should resign. It cannot be accepted. It's unbearable that somebody that is a prime minister would be prime minister while indicted. And he actually resigned, and he went to court as a regular citizen. And he was convicted, and he went to prison. And I think perhaps Netanyahu saw that and said, I must remain prime minister. I will be treated differently. And actually, if this is the way he thought, Netanyahu, I think he was right. Look at the case, Vivian. We are already 5 years in court. 5 years. The January will be 6 years that this case is being taking place at the district court. And this is something that, and every time that he has to go to court, he has something else that to do because he's the prime minister and the judges says, yes, okay, no problem, you shouldn't come. And what we are seeing, what the people of Israel is seeing, is a case that is actually conducted completely against the principle of equality. And actually we see that. Nobody else in court would be allowed what prime minister is allowed. And I think this is one of the main reasons to go for a pardon. That is also something that nobody even would imagine that can be possible while you are going to court. So we are talking about three completely eras in Israel's public life. The 70s, where actually Prime Minister Rabin resigned because of something that a regulation against the money that his wife actually had. The case in the early 2000s of Olmert. And I remember when I actually covered the Olmert case, the Katsav case, the president that was, and I remember the media, the foreign media, they asked me, well, you should be ashamed that you have a president in court and you have a prime minister. I said, not only I'm not ashamed, I'm very proud that my country is able to actually to trial the highest man in the country as if he was the lowest one. The principle of equality, as you say, the justice, it's not only made, is actually seen. And although these were very difficult times for us, for me, it was actually, I think, a moment that of proud that we are able to do so in court, and also for everyone to understand that you are not above the law. And what actually Netanyahu is asking now is to be above the law. Okay, I am actually, the public interest needs for me to be above the law. And this is something that I think a democratic country cannot allow.
Suzie, this brief, if we can call it that, now sits before President Herzog. He's in a very tough bind, and he's taking his time. Give us a sense as to how much time you think he might take, and if and how he might deal with this issue. I'll be a spoiler and step out in front and make this comment. Based on things that he's been saying, it's sort of like Hansel and Gretel, dropping crumbs along the way. President Herzog, I think, is setting us up for him to refuse the pardon request. But of course, I know there are many other opinions out there. And the reason I say that is because he's stressed the importance of adhering to the law, equality for all, that he will make a decision that is clearly in the best interests of the state. And based on what I know of him, and I think what we've seen of him in the past, I'd like to think that when he invokes the best interest of the state, the nation, that he is looking at the judicial system and the integrity of the judicial system holistically, not the interest of one person who happens to be prime minister. And I don't say that with any disrespect. I say that really as a lawyer looking at it, I think, technically. So there, I was a bit of a spoiler. That's what I'm expecting. What about you?
This is not a spoiler. We used to have a judge in the Supreme Court that he never wrote his opinions. He always said, I agree and I have nothing to add. And this is the only thing that I can put here. You asked me to be, well, I'm an Israeli, but I am not a prophet. So actually, I cannot say what President Herzog will do. But I really hope that the way you posed the question and the feeling that you had, that he will not harm the equality of before the law, and he will not damage the rule of law, and he will not undermine the judicial system and if the prosecution's independence, and therefore he will not allow for this request to be approved. I hope this is exactly what Herzog will do. But from what I know of President Herzog, he may also try to do some compromises. Perhaps to bring Netanyahu to a plea bargain again, and say, okay, I will not interfere while the case is open, but if you actually admit some guilt and you agree to a plea bargain now, even though it's very late in the case, and you are convicted, then there is something to talk about. Then the idea of pardon is relevant again. But we will see in a few weeks. He will need for an opinion of the Justice Ministry that deals with pardons, and then we will actually know what his decision will be. I do hope, Vivian, that you are completely right in your actually in the way that you posed it. I agree with you completely. I said, like I said before, I agree and have nothing to add.
Okay. Well, thank you very much, Suzie, for your insight, your thoughts, and hopefully in the next few weeks, we will receive some certainty from President Herzog. And then we're into the real point of all of this, which in my view is the political rumble and tumble. Suzie Navot, Professor of Constitutional Law at the Israel Democracy Institute. Thank you so much.
My pleasure, Vivian. Thank you.
Thanks, as always, for being here. We will be watching this story very closely and bringing you updates and analysis as appropriate. In the meantime, please rate us on your favorite podcast platform, like us on Substack, wherever you listen to State of Tel Aviv and beyond. Even better, review us. We could all use a boost in the algorithm wars. And if you do not do so already, your support in the form of a paid subscription would be appreciated deeply. Just go to our website, stateoftelaviv.com, and follow the prompts. It's really easy. We rely on your support to generate content. And thank you so much to those of you who have already answered the call. State of Tel Aviv and beyond is an independent outlet. We need your help. We love hearing from you, so please comment on our website, stateoftelaviv.com, or send us a note to hello@stateoftelaviv.com. On behalf of the State of Tel Aviv core team, Yon Zabo, our creative, graphic, visual, and marketing man, Amir White, producer and editor extraordinaire, sound guy, who is also impressively patient with me and my boomer tech deficiencies, and our social media manager who pitches in on everything, Maya Naftalin. Thanks to the team. Thanks to you for being here.